The program regularly scheduled at this time will not be seen, so that we may bring you the following WFTV Channel 9 Eyewitness News special.
Of my 30th anniversary, that's when I first thought about coming back. Now see here, this looks all original. 1967, that's civil engineers. Yeah, now this looks familiar, except the roads are in better shape. The roads were in horrible shape in those days. They didn't repair them at all. Now these are old South Vietnamese bunkers. In the 1960s, every building of any consequence, even residences, were fortresses, big bunkers. Bunkers then with sandbags on top of them. Actually, it looks like they're prospering well. I mean, look at the well-maintained park here, statues. Oh, that's nice. They've done a lot.
Good evening. I'm Richard Frohlich, and this is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial here in Washington, D.C., or as some simply call it, the Wall. It was a war to stop communism, part of the Cold War, but one of the hottest conflicts in American history. It seared the soul of this country, with millions saying the war was the right thing to do, and later millions saying it was not. And when it was over, and we left, and the North Vietnamese eventually conquered the South, the war receded into memory, for their country and for ours. But for hundreds of thousands of American war vets, Vietnam remains a chilling word, a place they would rather not revisit in memory or in person. Still, we found 3 vets who were willing to go back to find what had changed in the country of Vietnam and what had changed in themselves.
It's confronting old devils, and sometimes the best thing to do is confront the old devil.
Orlando's Bill Vose returned to Vietnam for the first time in 33 years.
Just bad memories and some good memories, but mostly bad memories.
Well, you're back.
I'm back, and it looks a lot better.
How could it not? Tan Son Nhut Airport was once an American air base. Bill Vose was once an American soldier. Vose is now second in command of the Orange and Osceola County State Attorney's Office. But in 1966, he was a lieutenant with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. After nearly 4 years in the Army, Vose volunteered for Vietnam. He would be shot within a week of getting there. He was laid up in a hospital, healed, and returned to battle.
Everybody, move out! Get out there!
This is America's memory of the Vietnam War. Helicopters moving troops, massive bombings, battles close up, and body bags. In the end, Americans left. Thousands of Vietnamese tried to leave with them. In April of 1975, after what some called a decent interval, the North Vietnamese invaded and conquered the South, their tanks marching through the front gate of the South Vietnamese presidential palace. Today, that palace is a tourist attraction, open to the public, frequented by school kids. Saigon, also known as Ho Chi Minh City, is a city with bustling traffic, many skyscrapers. It is not politically free in the way democracies are, but the new government's policy now welcomes capitalism, and American companies are taking them up on it. Bill Vose tells our government escort.
It's much better maintained now. The streets are better, and the buildings look a lot nicer.
At the hotel, the guide points out another old hotel site.
The Rex BOQ, yes. BOQ, Bachelor Officers Quarters. That's on the top was a bar on the top. It's still open, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
open.
go watch. We used to watch the war.
Yeah.
Let's check it right in where there's a village now and a road.
All right, but wait a minute now. There was a huge valley there.
Inside the hotel, Vose meets 2 other veterans, Mike Thibault, originally from Oregon, and now a senior Pentagon executive, and Mike Sturgis, a retired police officer from Washington State.
But I never saw these for over 30 years because I was hurt that day, and they flew me out in a basket. That's how I got to go. But this is that area.
They look at pictures of a battle site which changed the lives of all 3 men, and they hope the guide will be able to help them find it. But first, they find a building which they assume had been long destroyed.
I got shot in the stomach, shot in the chest, shot in the side, shot in the back, and then I got a bunch of shrapnel.
Without this hospital, Mike Thibault may have died.
I remember, and I'm almost sure we went through those doors right there.
Mike Sturgis nearly lost his leg after a landmine exploded, and Orlando's Bill Vose recovered here after being shot twice in the leg.
There were a lot of scary memories here. I remember the priest came by the next morning and I got communion that whole first week until it started to wear off, and I went back to being 22 again and said, "Thanks, Father, I don't need it anymore."
Their former surgical hospital is now a Vietnamese war museum, inside and out. The only reminder of its former self, the ghostly letters which hover over the emergency room parking. As they go upstairs, they enter a world which celebrates the weapons and the warriors from the other side, here in this very place where Americans recovered or died from wounds.
Well, this thing would take everything out of this room for about 100 yards. And these things, they were not as accurate, but they were very powerful.
Looking at the mines, thinking of the suffering, Mike Sturgis reflects.
I can just remember mainly the fear of, you know, am I going to lose a leg? Am I going to die? Because there were so many people, you know, around that were dying. And
ironically, the curator this day is a man who was a guerrilla fighter and whose job it was to make the mines. He is frail, nearly 80, and welcomes these vets to their former hospital, saying he hopes they can be friends. Again, Mike Sturgis.
it's bringing back an awful lot of memories, though. Ones that I haven't had for 32 years. And I thought I'd pretty well dug them all out and dealt with them, but each place we go, new ones come too. It feels like there's ghosts, and instead of running from them now, I feel like I can embrace them.
But it's a slow embrace for Bill Vose, as he writes in their visitor's book.
It brought back many memories of our stay here when it was an American Army hospital. We all three spent days and weeks here in 1966. We were here being cured from gunshot wounds received fighting your forces, and it was very memorable seeing the Museum of Weapons. Thank you and peace, William C. Vose, Orlando, Florida.
You're not bad for a second lieutenant.
Hey.
Next, we'll take a look at the countryside of Vietnam and find out what it was like to fight an enemy which could tunnel underground. Early in the war, there were some strange things American soldiers noticed, how the enemy could disappear at night or pop up in the morning as if underground. Well, it turns out they were. There were a series of tunnels honeycombing South Vietnam, some of them 3 levels deep. And if you were an American foot soldier, those tunnels could be trouble. A farmer and his water buffalo plow a rice paddy. We take pictures of 3 XGIs. Outstanding. But these rice paddies were not always so peaceful for Orlando's Bill Vose and his 2 buddies from the 173rd Airborne Brigade.
Yeah, the memories are trying to figure out where in that tree line over there the VC, or the National Liberation Front, has set up a sniper. And normally you would figure it out at when you were halfway across, and we would then spend $100,000 calling in either an airstrike or artillery fire on this guy, who would eventually just say it's time to go home and leave.
Go back down under the ground, take the tunnel home.
He'd go back and take the tunnel home, and we'd have spent, you know, the gross national product for 3 days and probably not got anybody.
The secret entrance of the tunnel with the trapdoor. The frame of the entrance of the trapdoor was made out of wood, no cement, no metal.
This is what remains of the massive tunnel network outside Saigon.
Half this size before, already wide and double size. From here, we can go down, go everywhere underground, but not now.
Yeah.
The Vietnamese have preserved the network at a site called Cu Chi, and the vets try one tunnel on for size.
Easier to be American soldier, harder to be Vietnamese soldier.
Don't you remember I used to tell you that then?
This is great. You want to go down?
No.
Bombs from B-52s did this damage. This is a view from the crater of one.
One big B-52 jet plane bomb crater is about 500 kilos. If this bomb hit tunnel, it could destroy 6 level of tunnel.
So
and, yes,
2 levels of the tunnel would be destroyed.
Destroyed.
Come on, Michael. Let's do it, buddy.
Vietnamese guerrilla fighters dug the tunnels all over South Vietnam. It provided them with places to travel and sleep during the day. They shared this space with bats then and now. These tunnels are incredibly small. This room, though, is a larger one because this room was used as a hospital. But the main purpose of these tunnels was to move people in the daytime so they could fight at night. Going into the tunnels was no favorite of GIs because the tunnels often had explosive surprises or false floors with sharp bamboo sticks.
So I had a couple of occasions where I went into tunnels and literally, a lot of times it would come down and it would look like a well and it would have a wooden floor and you'd have someone upstairs asking you, anything down there? And you'd say, no, nothing down here, and they'd say, well, get out of there then.
Generally, we were scared of going into tunnels and didn't want to go down there and really didn't develop it much. We'd drop stuff down there and try to blow them up, but really didn't explore it much.
More than 30 years later, what had been a lethal network for these American soldiers has been reduced to a tourist attraction.
Friendship.
But the memories of the terror these tunnels held remain.
I was talking to Bill as we were walking up, and I asked him, I said, do you feel like you need to be on guard? And he said, yeah.
Probably the great advantage I had was I was 18, so it was an adventure. And so psychologically, it doesn't happen until you get hurt. And then when you get hurt, you're sitting there and you're thinking, why me?
I always felt bad and angry because of all the brothers in my unit that got killed, that didn't go home. And now I feel like I can look out there in the jungle and say, hey, you know, here's to you, I wish you were here, but I know it's all right that you're not. I know that the 18-year-old that was over here, I left a lot of emotional parts here. I feel like I'm getting some of them back, and it's a darn good feeling.
Coming up next, we'll take you to a reunion of soldiers from both sides who meet for the first time in more than 30 years, this time without weapons. In 1966, Saigon was a city under siege, a very dangerous place for American soldiers. They faced the North Vietnamese Army, Viet Cong guerrilla fighters, or even just people planting bombs on the street. Still, the bombs are gone now, the enemy is gone, and we wonder what it would be like for the former adversaries to sit down and have lunch.
Maybe it's not turned on.
This could be an image of tourists in any country. The picture in Vietnam is of men who 33 years ago might have been expected to kill each other. These men you see are former Viet Cong guerrilla fighters, including a general. The Americans are all Purple Heart winners with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. The former general makes an observation.
We wanted to see you long time before, but because of this, we couldn't see you. Yes. We couldn't meet you because of these mines.
He refers to the mines like this one at a nearby war museum where he volunteers. Just such an exploding mine nearly cost vet Mike Sturgis his leg. These Vietnamese former guerrilla fighters are all in their late 70s now, and they did not seem to hold the war against these American vets.
We should close out the past and we know that, and look at the future. You know, it was better that we didn't fight before.
Orlando's Bill Vose.
I think it is easier for old soldiers to talk together sometimes than for diplomats.
It would seem they agree.
So here we talk as the friends.
Yes. Yes. That's because now we are.
Bởi vì chúng ta thực sự đã là bạn.
Both sides have lasting pain. This former Viet Cong colonel suffers from the effects of the poison Agent Orange. Still, he shares a meal and a smoke with the vets.
Okay, I'll
This former general still has missing family members. The translator tells us.
In my case also, I lost two relatives, and one is found already, another is still missing.
Mike Sturgis, by his own admission, had bitter memories of the war and bitter attitudes toward the Vietnamese he would meet in America. Yet this lunch elicits this comment from him.
One of the signs we saw, Vietnam is not a war, it's a country. And I personally feel that's the message that I'm going to try and spread when I go home.
Bill Vose.
I think all three of us agree that we wanted to come back to banish some old ghosts in our head, and hopefully we will go back and live better lives because of it. And
they end the meal with one hard reality, which all soldiers share in common.
We have a toast that has to do with just soldiers. It's to fallen comrades.
Nói chuyện với nhau hơn, nói chuyện với nhau.
fallen comrades.
Và trở thành những người gọi là đồng chí, những đồng bạn, gọi là đồng đội, đồng bạn.
Under a bust of communist leader Ho Chi Minh, the local People's Committee helps 3 Americans find the battle site which changed their lives. It's a dusty little village about an hour north of Saigon called Suan Lop. Americans are a rare enough sight in this area that the kids come out to take a look at them. 33 years ago, there was a battle in this area in June of 1966. It didn't affect the war, but for dozens of young GIs, it affected their whole lives.
Jeez, did you see the...
I just...
The suckers sneak up on you still today.
Orlando's Bill Vose reacts to the sight of a shy woman looking at him through the woods. 30 years ago, he would have expected her to be armed, and he would probably have shot her. This is actual footage shot by the 173rd in 1966. Vose commanded a platoon which was supposed to rescue another platoon pinned down by fierce fire several miles away. But a sudden mortar attack before dawn killed 4 men in his own squad.
Started firing over into probably right over there. And we had to run and get on the helicopters to go to this battle where we're going to now. This was not a... This was not a happy day. I left a couple of dead and wounded out here. Hey, guys.
A few miles away in what is now rich farm country, they spot the battlefield. Mike Sturgis was pinned down and fighting for his life, June 29th, 1966.
But I'm getting just right in my gut and my heart. I'm getting tight, starting to feel a little bit of that fear, very apprehensive.
About what?
The ghosts, a lot of ghosts out there.
And where that tree line is over there, where that little house is where the fight was.
The water's edge is as close as these veterans could come today, because what had been triple canopy jungle is now a farm. But the battlefield was out there about a mile away. And for the 3 veterans who came 10,000 miles to find it, this is close enough. 14 Americans died in these fields that day, 13 more wounded.
I can picture everything. All your buddies being blown up, fear, just horrendous gunfire.
And every one of those kids had a mother, and it was the mother, you know, that got the message that the thing that was most important to you was gone, and I think about that now.
As Vose's rescue patrol approached, he saw
just these rivulets of red, very bright red compared to the gray mud. And that's when I knew we were getting close to human beings.
the rescue platoon found the men who'd held out and evacuated them, Mike Thibault among them.
It's just something that you don't know what's pulling you, but someone said, well, you know, maybe your soul is in two places, and I think it is.
I can feel, you know, the guys that are still, you know, over there. And it's good that I'm going to be able to take, you know, some of their spirit home with me.
I was about third or fourth one, and I remember started seeing movement in the mud, and it was faces, and they were all gray, except for the eyes. And the teeth, with a big smile. Hey, you made it. They were very happy to see us. That's the good picture out of this. I mean, you know, all the dead bodies wasn't great, but the good picture was the look on these guys' faces. That made it all work.
Most people who served in Vietnam have gotten out of the military by now, but not all. We talked to one man who stayed in and has done rather well. General Hugh Shelton is chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the top military man in the United States, a 173rd Airborne member, and a Vietnam vet.
I think that Americans today realize that the men that served in that period of time in Vietnam were the same type of dedicated Americans that are serving today in Kosovo, or that participated in Desert Storm, or fought in Korea or World War II. The country did not believe in that war. I mean, they thought that for many reasons that the United States should not be there. But as soldiers, the commitment, the dedication, the courage, the sacrifice that it took to go to Vietnam, in fact, in some respects, even tougher, because particularly for those that started serving in the later years of the war, starting about 68 and on, realized that this wasn't a popular war. But they carried out the mission, they carried out the orders that they were given, and they went and they fought well.
He has not returned to Vietnam himself, though he does hope to do so in the future. General Shelton is proud of the many leaders in politics and business who come from the Vietnam veteran community.
I just went to a function not long ago with about 25 top CEOs in the nation, all Vietnam veterans. I look over in the Congress, and you've got individuals like Senator Kerry and Senator Hale and many others that served in Vietnam. So they've done very well. We went, we did our very best, we sacrificed, our families did. My family was without me for 2 years, just as other veterans were. And it was for, as far as we were concerned, a good cause, keeping South Vietnamese people from being oppressed by communism. The political realities, divorcing those from what was going on the ground, just a tremendous number of American soldiers doing the very best they could under very difficult circumstances and fighting as heroically and as courageously as I've seen them fight time and time again over this last 35 years.
The names of those who died in that battle in 1966 are here on this wall in Washington.
You got it. What do you do?
And the children and grandchildren of those who died in the war on that day and on all the other days come here to touch their names. They take an etching in memory of mortal wounds, to reflect on loss and survival. The wall reminds all of us how real this war still is for so many, how fresh the pain for some, the injuries which healed on the surface long ago. Returning to Vietnam is not something every vet wants to do. Many who remember the names on this wall will not forget or forgive the cruelties which happened to so many Americans, killing and maiming them. And also, no vet can forget what happened to the POWs in those camps. Still, the 3 people who returned to Vietnam were forced to confront their past and their present, and it did bring them a real measure of healing. In Washington, I'm Richard Frohlich. Good night.